When you heal from childhood trauma, it is inevitable that some of the people closest to you are not going to heal right along with you. You'll still be close, but you'll have to watch them stay stuck in soul-deadening situations, bad relationships, unable to see that they could get free and that they actually have the ability to leave and change their life. How do you help someone who refuses your help, who gets angry at you when you even try to encourage them, let alone tell them what to do? My letter today is from a woman I'll call Allison, whose best friend still lives with her terrible parents. And she writes, "Hi, Anna. This is the first letter I've written like this, not just to you, but to anything like this. I'm a private person, and I try to handle issues independently." She says, maybe a bit too independently, but that's a whole other thing. I'm lost when it comes to this. All right, I've got my fairy pencil. I'm going to circle things that I want to come back to in a second reading, but let's read through Allison's letter one time and see what's going on. All right, she says, I'm an adult with CPTSD. I've done a lot of work to heal from it. I have a close friend I have known since we were kids. She also suffers from CPTSD, and I know this because we have bonded talking about our respective crappy childhoods, and we relate so much to each other in a way that only people who have been through similar experiences can understand. She's often been my lifeline through the years that have been very bad. She's the closest friend I ever had. I care about her a lot. I love her. She's my family. We both have our own crappy family situations, and while I feel like I've made progress in getting out of mine, she has yet to even leave. That's not a criticism, as if it were so easy. I know how hard it is, how it feels easier to stay than to face the unknown or ask for help. But I don't want her to be left behind. I have tried numerous times throughout the years to talk to her about leaving. She wants to, but there's always a reason not to leave. And while they're valid, the awful conditions she's living in cannot possibly be worth it. I've known her for nearly 10 years now, and while she's made progress with her mental health and trauma recovery, though how much one can actually do that while also enduring the abuse from the same abuse from childhood is, I believe, drastically impeded and undermined. But she, at the rate she's going, says Allison, it could be at least 10 more years by the time she's ready to break free, or she'll crash and burn out long before then. Even worse, if she never gets away at all, I feel like I'm waiting on the cusp of witnessing a disaster. If things don't improve or change, I can't see this ending well. I'm sick with worry and heartache. Today I tried again to talk with her about leaving, and predictably she didn't react well. I wrote her a long message that I put everything into. It took so much out of me. I put every ounce of honesty, compassion, care, and love into that message, trying to reach her, but her response was more the same I'm used to hearing. I know that she's really scared. She's pretty much on her own. There's me, but I live in a different city 2 hours away. I've talked to her about reaching out to supports that could help her out of this, but she has shut that down. I want to help her, but I don't know how. Other than the support and love I can offer, it feels like all I can do is witness as she continues to suffer with no end in sight, and it's becoming unbearable. My question is, what can someone like me do in this situation? Is there anything a person can do? I know that you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. That I'm not responsible for them. That it's not in my power to change or fix them, nor should it be. That kind of decision and action has to be made by the person themselves. But I just feel so helpless, and it's painful and horribly sad to witness. I don't know what to do. So I wrote to Allison and just asked if she could clarify for me, like what's going on, because my opinion on this is a little different if there's like grave physical danger. I wasn't sure exactly what I was listening for, but I wanted to hear, is Allison just imagining that it's so terrible and interfering, or is her friend in danger? Okay, so she wrote back to me and she said, her friend's home life is toxic, dysfunctional, and abusive. The father is an alcoholic that's completely checked out as a parent. The mother is a textbook narcissist. Together they make quite a pair, and Okay, so Allison says, I've heard from my friend all the awful things they've done and said to her over the years, and I'm disgusted and angered to my core. They criticize everything she does. She's always falling short in their eyes. They criticize her appearance and generally treat her as if she was a mistake that weighed down the biggest burden in their lives. They have her convinced that she can never survive in the world on her own without them, and yet every single message they seem to be sending her is how deeply she's unwanted. But I know that's bullshit, and I have pointed out as much to her, that her parents, most notably her mom's retirement plan, is her. They need her to stay to take care of them, especially as they get into older age. Her mother's the most egregious with what she asks of her. I hear about some of the things she has her do, like clipping her toenails. It just makes me want to scream. My friend caught COVID, could barely breathe. Her mother forced her to mop the floors. Only letting her stop when my friend's breathing became so labored, her mom was worried the act of cleaning might kill her. Clearly, they want her to exist for them as some kind of live-in servant. I don't think they would be able to afford a personal support worker with what their pensions will give them. I feel like my friend has been born, raised, and groomed to serve them. We met in high school, and she told me years later that I was the first person to start pointing out that the things her parents did and said to her were super effed up. They were not right. And the reason it stood out to me as wrong in the first place was because I was familiar with what abuse looked like coming from my own abusive situation. But it always shocked me just how effing wretched her parents could be, from controlling her and every little bit of her life when she was a kid and teen, not letting her leave the house under the guise of being strict. But really, I see it as their way of keeping her isolated and under their control. There were times when she would have gotten their express permission weeks in advance to go out with friends, and then at the last second, she was not allowed to go. And this is less effective on her as an adult, but given that she still lives with them, I know she still has to live around this. She tells me that she avoids making social commitments, not because she doesn't want to, but because she can't take the grief she'll get for doing it when she gets home. And just because she's grown doesn't stop them from trying to control her through intimidation and threats. If she's disrespectful to them, which means her not acquiescing to their beck and call with a smile on her face, they threaten her. And one time she told me they were going to take the door to her room off for talking back to them. As a grown-ass woman, and another time recently, her father threatened to beat some respect into her. These are the bits and pieces I've gotten from her, and I can only imagine the things she hasn't told me. And knowing how abusers are behind closed doors through my own experience, it's horrifying to consider. The most I've heard from her was that her mother hit her when she was younger until she got big enough to defend herself. It's devastating to see this playing out. My heart breaks over and over again thinking about all the years they're stealing from her. But then the sick turning in my stomach knowing that as an adult now she's letting them. I've tried so many times to encourage her to leave and warn her that there might be a day she wakes up and realizes just how much time she's lost, and that whatever money she's apparently saving by living at home is not worth what continuing to live there is doing to her. Anything that costs you your peace is too expensive. The life she could have that they are taking from her, a future she could have with a family of her own who actually love her. I want to scream. And yet I know that it's not that simple. It's like when people say the thing about women staying with abusive partners. Why doesn't she just leave? And I know it's not that easy, and I know it better than most others would. And I wonder that if life didn't play out for me that way, the way it has, that I would be stuck in the same boat of being trapped, living with family that mistreated and abused me. And I'm still going through the process of recovering from all the trauma that she has left me. And I will still probably be dealing with it for years to come. And I worry that if my friend doesn't get out now, she's going to be spending the rest of her life regretting it. And she said, I hope that clears it up. Oh my goodness, Allison. All right, I barely circled anything. I just feel very moved by your letter, and there are no easy answers for this one. Everything, you already said some things I could have told you, like, you know, that clarity that it's time to leave. it almost always has to come from within, unless like the cops step in, unless the people die, unless things get so violent that the neighbors notice and somebody comes in and intervenes. This is a dodgy gray area situation where, you can't really call anybody. I don't know, maybe you could do an adult welfare check. What I was going to suggest to you is that you check in with a women's shelter and talk to them about this situation and what they would recommend. They have a lot of knowledge about signs to look for, about what to do, what you can't do, what is helpful to people, what tends to make them feel threatened. So I have a very dear loved one in my family who is in a relationship. It's not the parents, it's a partner, and it's been going on a long time. And years ago, when they had children who were small, I used to sometimes try to intervene. And everything that you're describing, like, I just relate to you so much. That is how I felt about my loved one. And everything that I ever did to try to help fell flat. Like, occasionally there were these little moments where they did want help and they would, maybe try something for a couple of days, but they would always go back. And it was very, very, very hard for me to accept. It didn't make sense to me. It just seemed so obvious. And now that I'm older, like, it's been a long time. I haven't even had contact with this relative in a long time. But now that I'm older, I recognize more the organic change that takes place in people, the way trauma, and my relative is very, very traumatized, like very traumatized as a kid. And, it's not surprising that this is the pattern right now, but you're right. When people stay in this type of thing, then the pattern gets more and more kind of locked in. And I don't expect it's ever going to change. I was really hopeful for a long time. I used to give money. I used to, and then the authorities intervened and, I was part of that. And I'm not the one who phoned it in. I phoned it in once very early on and I got cut out of their lives for years. And I didn't do that again because staying in their life was how I could be a lifeline to my loved one and the children. Just staying in their life. And I thought, well, if it's really bad, hopefully, and they didn't even live in the same city as me. If it's really bad, somebody else will call the authorities. And they did eventually. That ended up happening eventually. I was always racked with guilt about that. I should have done more. I should have done it differently. But when I did do it, it made everything worse. And it resulted in no contact ever again. I really, I played every card I had at a certain point to go, you've got to leave. You have to leave. I screamed at this person I loved. I regret screaming, but at the time, actually, a social worker was coaching me, and not wrongly, make them understand, that this is it. They're never going to see their kids again if they don't change. And so I took it upon myself to make them understand. And boy, that's a loaded phrase, isn't it? You can't really make somebody understand. You can try. So I did my best on that one, and it was heartbreaking. And over many years, I've found some detachment from it. And I live a little bit in fear, that it's going to come back to bite me because that situation, there's a lot of other sort of toxic things going on with it. And they do unpleasant things to people, and I don't want that to happen. I just want them to be okay. And I hope one day we can have a reunion in okayness and not in anger or anything. I never succeeded in what you can do about that. And I'm just so sorry to tell you that. I don't know. But if I had it to do again, I would go to a women's shelter and ask them. I would just say, I'm the one who needs some counseling on this. Because once you're caught up in the way that you're emotionally invested in the way it's tearing you apart, you're also the victim of this situation. It's ruining your peace. And you have your own healing to do. And so I'm not saying, cut yourself off, don't deal with somebody who refuses to change. But I'm just saying, whatever you do, stay very, very focused on your own healing so that you continue. I think the best service you can give to somebody who, when they do decide they want to change, is be somebody solid and dependable who's got it together. And you're such a good friend and you love her so much and you're able to do this, relatively without judgment. I was going to say, and I know you know this, but believing that she needs to leave on the time scale that you believe she needs to do it. There's a way of looking at that it's a criticism, it's a judgment, it's something that you can't really know yet. When people, it's kind of like when people who drive drunk are forced to go to AA, they don't often stay sober because it didn't come from in here. It didn't come from in here. You can't really like make somebody get sober. You can't make somebody leave a relationship they don't want to leave. It's just not in human nature. And so it comes from within. Why do we ever recover? And I think that the things that make us strong and get to a day sometimes, why I have eventually, gotten back to, or gotten up to living in a functional way, is there were some good people around us, some solid people. We felt enough acceptance and non-judgment that we could sort of connect with them. And I think a lot of how we recover from a terrible childhood is through the relationships we have with other strong people. And some of those people were, my friends. Some of them were my friends' parents who helped me out when I was a kid. Some of them were relatives who have told me since then, I really should have done more at the time. Sorry, I didn't know what to do. And teachers that I had, and then pursuits that I had, like jobs that I had that I actually really liked and got skills where I could make money. That's really important for somebody in an abusive situation. There's often, a great difficulty making money. And so I find that traumatized people often have this fraught relationship with money where they resent people who have it. They resent authority. I say we, right? But those are the very, being able to work with authority and to embrace money is how you have a living enough that you have autonomy to get out of a terrible situation. If I had to guess, I would say the reason that she stays is because abandonment melange. The thought of leaving sounds even worse. The thought of being alone, the thought of making a separation with somebody with whom she has a bond is so threatening. It is an existential threat in her mind. And, who among us hasn't done that before, especially if you grew up with trauma? Whether you do it in a romantic relationship or you do it in some other form, jobs, staying in a terrible job. I've known people who are just complaining about their horrible job for decades and they don't leave. And sometimes you just want to go, come on, but there's something there. There's something there. Part of the trauma is not being able to leave. Part of the trauma is being in it. And there's some awareness where you're complaining to your friends and going, this is terrible. They do this. I hate it. But part of the trauma, part of the sickness of the trauma, the damage done by the trauma is an attachment to that very situation and a feeling like it's just impossible to go. I know you know that, but I'm saying it out loud for all of us. It's part of it. And so any part of trauma that can be healed will help that particular aspect of the trauma. That symptom, that staying in terrible relationships where you're miserable, that is a trauma symptom. On the outside, we might think if you would just get out of there, when you said, she could have a family of her own and be happy. And I thought to myself, I want her to have that. But she, when you've been living the way she's been living, there's a whole process there to get where you can have a functional relationship. There's a process of healing, and may she find it now. May she get there very quickly. We all want that for her. Maybe she'll see this video, we love you, friend, come in, the water's fine. To make a big change like that, to really exit the consciousness of an abusive relationship, there needs to be a lot of support, a lot of gentleness, not judgment, not you got to do this. You have to do it now. My timeline says you got to go. And, it's not that your timeline, Allison, is reasonable. It's not that it's crazy, but it doesn't work for another person. The timeline is when they can do it. That's when it is. I don't think we should abandon people with this sort of, cold, well, you make your own choices. I'm not saying that that's necessarily that either. You can be present. You can stay talking to her, and just when she's going through a crisis and tells you about it, you can be like, I'm so sorry you're going through that. I've been watching you go through this a long time. I really hope one day you're ready to make your move, and I'm here for you when you can do it. That's a nice way to offer that help rather than, come on, you've got to do it. You're wasting your life. Even if you're right, that's a level of pressure for a traumatized person that it's just obvious that she can't really cope with that it shuts her down. It makes her flee. So make space by mentioning softly the possibilities, accept where she is, give her your love. And, in the worst case scenario, if she ends up dying in this situation, I would really hope that it wouldn't turn violent and that would be the cause of it. But if she just stays forever, I meant. If at the very least she'd have a loving friend in her life, and that is a precious and beautiful thing. And I think you're lovely for offering that to her. It's very rare that people have a friend like you. So I'm proud of you. I appreciate what you're doing. And I want you to care for yourself so that your peace is not lost over this. I assume I'm much older than you. And one of the things I've learned, I've seen people, die of drug addiction when I just like, why? Why can't they stop? There's a way to do that. They must do it, or they must get out of the relationship. My mother drank, and she died of cancer. And while she was dying, I was so on her, like, you have to stop. You have to stop. This is going to kill you. And she didn't stop, and she died. And then she wasn't there. And I was like, why didn't I just kind of hang out a little more? Like, there are some things we can't control, and we can love people anyway if we can, take care of ourselves and hold our peace around it. So that's what I wish for you, Allison. I'm sad for you. I think the people in the comments are going to have wisdom to share about this, some different opinions. Everybody, please be kind to all parties in this story. Let's be supportive. I have a little feeling that your friend might see this video. So, let's keep that in mind and not put her down, and just offer encouragement there, because there's a lot of people who watch this channel who are in a very similar situation too. And when you speak about this friend of Allison's, all the people in the friend situation hear you. All the people in Allison's situation hear you. So remember to be kind and encouraging to everybody here. Allison, you're at risk here of being in a codependent relationship. I don't think you're doing anything wrong, but a codependent relationship is where you get overly invested in somebody else changing so that you can be happy. And so for your sake, I want you to have some boundaries around this. And so one thing that I want to put in front of you is my criteria for what are some of the signs that you're in a codependent relationship. I have a free download you can look at. Anybody here can download it for free too. It's right here. You can click on that, and I will see you very soon.